Time. So, three scary stories that happen on the job. What's the job? It matters. She's lagging.
This happened when I was 15 years old. Back then, I was always looking for ways to make extra money. I wasn't old enough to get many on-the-books jobs, so I would occasionally babysit for families around my town. Most of the time, it was people my parents knew or neighbors who needed someone to watch their kids for a few hours. One afternoon during summer break, I was browsing Craigslist and found an ad from a woman looking for a babysitter. The post explained that she worked overnight shifts and needed someone to stay at her house with her 6-year-old daughter, Rose. According to the ad,
Rose is the demon. Rose is a demon. What was the name of the girl? Yeah, that was Rose in Resident Evil. That was the daughter. Rose Winters. Mia's and Ethan daughter.
Rose would already be asleep before I arrived and would remain asleep most of the night. The pay was surprisingly good for what sounded like an easy job. I emailed the woman and got a response about an hour later.
There's no daughter. It's just pretend. Because, scary things, scary true stories. He was actually something to kidnap her, the babysitter. Probably young, probably to be, Andrew Tate probably behind it.
She asked for my phone number and called me that evening, and she sounded completely normal. She spoke calmly and answered all my questions. She explained that she had to leave for work before I would arrive, so she would hide a key outside the house. She told me exactly where to find it. Since I was only 15, my mom wanted to talk to her before agreeing to anything.
Definitely Andrew Tate.
The woman spent several minutes speaking to my mom on the phone. Whatever they discussed seemed to satisfy my mom because afterward, she told me it sounded like a great idea. The babysitting job was scheduled for the following night at around 9:30 p.m. When the time came, my mom drove me to the address. The house was located in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes away from where we lived. It sat near the end of a dead-end street and was surrounded by large trees. As we pulled into the driveway...
Doesn't this look like the house in Halloween? Where's Michael Myers? It's right there.
I noticed every light inside the house was on. My mom waited while I walked to the front porch and checked the hiding spot the woman had described. The key was exactly where she said it would be. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. After setting my backpack down, I turned around and waved goodbye to my mom as she backed out of the driveway. Then I was alone. The house was dead quiet. I figured Rose was already asleep, just like her mom said. Inside was a pretty standard house at first glance. There were family photos on the walls, and a few toys sat near the living room couch. I saw a pink backpack leaning against a chair. There were kids' drawings attached to the fridge with magnets. Everything seemed ordinary. Still, I wanted to know the layout of the house, so I walked through the first floor. The kitchen connected to a hallway leading towards several bedrooms.
I mean, obviously, that makes sense. Or you go into a house that you don't know, and the first thing you do is what? Oh, the kid is probably sleeping. I'm not even checking on the kid. Let me grab some food, get on the couch, and watch movies. Or actually sleep. Honestly.
As I stepped into that hallway, I glanced through an open doorway on my right. What I was not expecting to see was a man standing inside the room. He was facing the window looking out it, but that fact quickly made the sight more unsettling because it was pitch black outside. There was nothing to look at. I stared for several seconds before finally speaking.
Hello?
The second I made a sound, he turned around. The first thing I noticed was a smile. The second thing I noticed was that one of his front teeth were missing. I asked who he was, and his smile never changed. He didn't answer. I backed out of the doorway and pulled out my phone and called the woman. She answered after a few rings, and I explained that there was a man in one of the bedrooms. She sounded confused for a second before acting like she suddenly remembered. That part of it really still sticks with me. Then she explained that it was her brother who had dementia and sometimes wandered around at night. She told me not to worry because he's harmless.
And she didn't fucking say anything before. When you tell a 15-year-old girl that she's gonna be with a 6-year-old there in a hotel, there's a fucking full grown ass man.
That explanation didn't make me feel any better. If her brother was living there, he should have been mentioned in the ad or on our phone call. Before hanging up, she told me to help myself to anything in the fridge and I could sleep in the guest room at the end of the hallway. After the call ended, I stood there for another minute just contemplating my situation. Eventually, I decided to check out the rest of the hallway. The room where the man had been standing remained open, but he was no longer visible from the doorway. That made me nervous. I continued farther down the hall. There were 4 doors besides the guest room. I tried the first one. Locked. I tried the second one. Locked. The third one, locked. The fourth one opened about 3 inches before stopping. I looked through the crack. The room appeared empty. I couldn't see much because the lights were off. I pushed the door a little farther. It was just an empty room. Feeling stupid for being scared, I continued toward the guest room. As I passed the fridge again, I noticed something strange. The drawings attached to it looked old, really old. The paper had yellowed around the edges. One of the drawings had dust sitting on top of the magnet holding it in place. The backpack I'd seen earlier looked faded too. I started wondering when the last time a child had actually been in that house was. The thought made me uncomfortable. I realized that despite being there for almost half an hour, I still hadn't seen a single sign that Rose currently lived there. I hadn't heard her, and I hadn't seen her room. I hadn't even seen any recent toys. I reached the guest room at the end of the hallway. It was a small room. I set my backpack on the floor. Then I noticed something. There was no lock on the door. As I turned around to look back into the hallway, there was the man again, standing at the opposite end of the hallway. He was looking at me again.
This is literally Resident Evil shit. Did he say that she check on the kid?
And his smile came back on his face. I hadn't heard him approach. It was like he just teleported there. I honestly don't know how long he had been standing there. The missing tooth was visible even from where I stood. For several seconds, we stared each other down, me looking at him like he was some confused animal and not even an actual person. Then I quickly stepped inside the room and shut the door. I sat on the edge of the bed trying to calm myself down. I knew well of dementia from a young age, as my great-grandmother passed away with dementia. This allowed me to justify this man's actions. But deep down, I knew something felt wrong. I called my mom 3 times until she finally picked up. I told her of the situation I was in, from the unannounced brother with dementia to the fact that I couldn't even find the child in the house. For a few moments, she was silent. Then she told me she was coming to get me immediately. Hearing that made me feel relieved and scared at the same time.
I'm trying to think what's the thing? What's the story here? Does the brother hurt people and the women called? Was the woman coerced and that man is not really, it doesn't really have dementia, he's just serial killer? I don't.
Scared because even my mom thought something was up here. She hung up after she said she'd be there as fast as possible. A few minutes passed before I heard footsteps coming down the hallway toward my room.
Roro.
I sat completely still. The footsteps got closer until they stopped directly outside the door. Everything went silent, and I stared at the doorknob. I checked my phone, and the woman still hadn't called back to see if everything was okay. I decided to call her myself, but after 3 attempts, she never picked up. While I was waiting, the bedroom door opened a few inches. I couldn't see who was standing outside. The opening wasn't wide enough. I sat there staring at it. The door remained cracked open, but whoever was on the other side didn't enter. I knew it had to be the brother. It was those final, tense seconds where I decided I was getting out of there, and I got off the bed, moved to the window, and forced it open. I climbed out and dropped into the backyard. Then I didn't stop running until I reached the street. I crossed to the other side and kept going. I ended up nearly a block away before finally slowing down. I pulled out my phone to call my mom again. Before I could dial, a text message appeared. It was from the woman's number. The message simply asked where I was going. I immediately looked back toward the house. I didn't see anyone outside or at the windows. I didn't see any cameras when I entered the house, yet somehow she knew I had left. That was when I became convinced something was seriously wrong. I called my mom and told her not to come directly to the house. I told her to pick me up further down the street. About 10 minutes later, she pulled up. I jumped inside and locked the door, and we left immediately. Neither of us ever contacted the woman again. I never figured out who the man really was. I never figured out if Rose actually existed. I never figured out why all the bedroom doors were locked. There's a slight possibility that it was all real and that I was just extremely paranoid and dipped out, but the chances of that are slim to none. Something weird was going on in that house.
You didn't call the cops? You don't want to know how that shit ends? You don't want to know who that fucking guy was? Who's the lady? I'm upset. There's no end.
When I was 15 or 16, I got a summer job cleaning units in a low-income housing condo complex. I got the job through the property manager, who I used to babysit for, and for a high school student, it paid surprisingly well. The job was simple. Whenever a tenant moved out, we would go in and clean the unit to prepare it for the next family. Many of the units had been abandoned in a hurry. Belongings were often left behind, and some places looked as if people had simply gotten up and left one day. I worked alongside a university student I'll call Jen. She was about 20 or 21 and naturally took the lead while I followed her direction. One day, we were assigned a unit on the end of a row. The layout becomes important, so I'll explain it briefly. When you entered through the front door, you walked into the living room. On the right side were two sets of stairs, one leading up to the second floor and one behind a door leading down to the basement. The basement stairs turned twice, meaning you couldn't see into the basement from the main floor. The basement itself was just one large unfinished concrete room with a washer, dryer, furnace, and a single hanging light bulb. There were no closets, side rooms, alcoves, or places to hide. When we entered the unit, it was obvious the previous tenants had left in a hurry. The kitchen was filthy and most of their belongings were still there. We spent the first part of the afternoon packing everything into garbage bags and sorting items that could be donated. Once that was finished, we started cleaning. Part of the kitchen cleanup involved pulling the oven and fridge away from the walls and cleaning them thoroughly. We also removed the drawer underneath the oven. When it came time to put it back, we discovered the rails were damaged and it wouldn't slide in properly. For reasons that made sense at the time, Jen and I stood on opposite sides and kicked it until it wedged itself back underneath the oven. When we tried pulling it out again, it wouldn't budge. We both immediately regretted doing that, but we figured the property manager could deal with it later. After that, we split up. Jen headed upstairs to clean the bedrooms while I stayed downstairs removing the glass light fixtures so I could wash them. I was standing on a ladder in the living room when I heard Jen call my name from upstairs. I called back, to no response. I climbed down and went upstairs. When I found Jen, she was cleaning a bedroom with headphones on. I asked what she wanted. She looked confused. "What, did you call me?" I said. She laughed and shook her head. "No." I shrugged it off and went back downstairs. One thing that always bothered me about that unit was the attic access above the staircase. It was just a square opening in the ceiling leading into a dark crawl space. The cover was missing, so every
This is literally from Resident Evil 7.
time I walked underneath it, I found myself looking up into a square of complete darkness. A few minutes later, I heard my name again. This time when I called back, Jen immediately yelled from upstairs, saying, "I didn't call you, you're hearing things." At the time, I agreed
I do sometimes hear some people calling my name, and nobody's there.
with her. It was strange, but I wasn't frightened. Not yet. A little while later, I was standing at the kitchen sink cleaning the light fixtures. I turned around to grab a fresh sponge and nearly tripped. The oven drawer was sitting halfway out on the floor. Immediately, I thought it was odd. Jen and I had practically kicked the thing into place. We'd also confirmed afterward that it was completely stuck. Still, I just kicked it back in. It took several hard kicks before it wedged itself under the oven again. To make sure, I grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. It was stuck. Satisfied, I went back to cleaning. A few minutes later, I turned around again and almost tripped. The drawer was back out. I hadn't heard anything. Nobody else was downstairs. This time, I felt genuinely unsettled. The drawer hadn't simply slid out. It had been jammed into place. I left it where it was and decided it was the property manager's problem.
This sounds so much like audiobooks. Like I'm just reading not reading, but listening to an audiobook. I might like that. I might want to get audiobooks.
When I checked on Jen,
Scary ones.
she was still upstairs cleaning, so I returned to my own work. Eventually, I started reinstalling the clean light fixtures. Since it was a bright summer afternoon, I turned the lights off while I worked. I was standing on a small ladder trying to secure one of the fixtures when the lights suddenly switched on. The sudden brightness startled me, and I fell backward on the ladder. A second later, the fixture slipped from my hands and came crashing down. It narrowly missed hitting me in the head. For a few seconds, I just sat there on the floor. I could see the light switch from where I had fallen. Nobody was near it. At the same time, I could clearly hear Jen moving around upstairs. Only a few seconds had passed. There was no possible way she could have run downstairs, turned on the light, and gotten back upstairs. The switch had somehow turned on by itself. At least
I mean, maybe Jane is not the one upstairs. Saying?
that's what
What the fuck happened?
it's cleaning. Or natural. I was just uncomfortable. Only a few seconds had passed. There was no possible way she could have run downstairs, turned on the light, and gotten back upstairs. The switch had somehow turned on by itself. At least that's what it looked like. I still wasn't thinking about ghosts or anything supernatural.
Which
I was
had a
just
spider
uncomfortable.
crawling up
At
my
that
leg.
point, I
The fuck?
decided I was done working alone and went upstairs to find Jen. When I told her what happened, she looked uneasy. Then she told me
Can't do
something I
that when
hadn't
I'm listening to this
expected.
shit.
A few minutes earlier, she thought she'd heard someone call her name too. It didn't sound like me. We were both officially creeped out. The only task left was sweeping the basement. Neither of us wanted to go down there alone, so we went together. The basement was exactly as I described earlier. One large open concrete room with nowhere to hide. While Jen swept, I sat on the dryer and talked with her. A few minutes later, we finished and headed back upstairs. We were relieved to be almost done. We started gathering our supplies in the living room. I was standing maybe 2 feet from the open basement door when it happened. From below us came the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. Both of us froze. The footsteps were loud enough that neither of us questioned what we were hearing. Then came something far worse. The footsteps suddenly broke into a run. They were charging up the stairs, fast and loud, coming directly toward us. The footsteps got louder. I looked at Jen, and her face had gone completely white. Neither of us said a word. Running on pure instinct, I grabbed the basement door and slammed it shut as hard as I could. Then Jen and I ran. We flew out the front door and across the lawn. At one point, I heard Jen yell behind me, "The key!" I yelled back, "Leave it." Neither of us stopped until we were on the other side of the complex. I barely remember what happened afterward. Eventually, we returned to the property manager and told her someone had been inside the unit. We left our cleaning supplies behind and never went back. As far as I know, she contacted the police before anyone entered the condo. We never told her what we had actually experienced. What could we say? That something invisible had spent the entire afternoon calling our names, moving objects around, turning lights on, and finally charging up the basement stairs? It sounded ridiculous. Even now, I'm not someone who believes every strange story is paranormal. I've had other experiences in my life that could probably be explained one way or another. This one is different, though. Maybe we imagined hearing our names. Maybe there was some mechanical explanation
Maybe a schizo.
for the oven drawer. Maybe the light switch malfunctioned. But that basement was empty. There was nowhere for anybody to hide. And those footsteps weren't distant or ambiguous. They sounded exactly like someone running up a staircase directly toward us. Even now, more than 20 years later, hearing someone run up a set of stairs sends me right back to that summer afternoon.
Winchy.
I'm still a skeptic, but I never have been able to explain what happened in that condo.
So this was in 2005? Sam. Damn. Tommy!
When I was younger, I was a hustler and a go-getter, always looking for the next way to make a quick buck. And my mom knew an older couple from a church group who needed help around their property for a couple of weeks.
Hustler.
Their names were Richard and Elaine, and they were both in their late 60s. Old, but not super old. They lived in a pretty rural area about 40 minutes away from my house. They were in one of those older farmhouses with a long...
I was a hustler when I was a kid. Yeah. Why? Because you clean, like, maybe did the grass and shit to make a few bucks? Do you still have that money? You don't, right? The money that you made with this, did you make it to save up for something in the future, like today? No, then you didn't. You're not a hustler. A hustler is someone who, I'd say, has been getting a job since he was like 10 or 12 or some shit like that. You know, just a few things just to make a little bit of money so that when he reaches 18, he has money to go to college or to get a car, or like when he reaches like 25 or something, he actually can buy a fucking house. Did you use your money to what? To buy a PlayStation or a computer? Nothing wrong with that, but that's not hustling. A hustler tries to get money so he can reach a point where he doesn't have to do anything else, no, to get money because he's already have enough.
gravel driveway and woods behind the property. The deal was simple, that I would stay there for a little over a week, help Richard with yard work, cleaning out the garage, moving furniture, painting a fence, things like that, and they would pay me at the end. My mom trusted them because she knew Richard from years back, and Elaine seemed really sweet.
They are PDF files. That's what I'm thinking. Either only one of them or both. I was trying to get a hit on him. Was he like, did he say that he was like 14 or 15? Yeah. You were about to be a victim, bro.
The first time I met her. She was quiet, but she smiled a lot and kept asking if I was hungry.
Oh,
The house itself was fine. It was
Not
what you'd
good.
expect an elderly couple to live in a quiet area. Upstairs at the end of the hall was the room I'd be sleeping. On my first day there, Richard showed me around the property and then gave me a verbal list of things we'd work on, and Elaine made dinner. I noticed early on that Elaine didn't talk much, but she always had a neutral to half smile on her face. She asked my name 3 different times, to which Richard just said she forgets things sometimes. I figured he meant normal old person forgetfulness, so I didn't think much of it. That night, I went upstairs around 11 and tried to sleep. Sometime around probably 3 in the morning, I woke up and heard footsteps in the hallway. Someone was walking back and forth outside my room. I knew it. The floorboards creaked every few seconds. Maybe Richard was going to the bathroom.
What's
The
they
footsteps
doing?
didn't go anywhere. They just passed my door, went down the hall, turned around, and came back. I laid there in the dark listening to it for maybe 10 minutes.
Wasn't there a movie about this? Is it the Deborah Ann or some shit like that? Is that her name? Let me check. No, Deborah. Is it Deborah? Um, I have a fastest way to look it up. Let me go to the horror bandwagon. Deborah Logan, the taking of Deborah Logan. This is about someone with dementia, some shit like that. It's probably the same. And oh, he's writing this now. I bet that's the plot of the fucking movie.
And it got increasingly uncomfortable until they seemed to stop right outside the door. I stared at the big, dark gap under the door, and I felt like I could see the outline of 2 feet. After a while, the footsteps moved away again, which confirmed that what I was seeing was in fact 2 outlines of feet. The next morning, I mentioned it to Richard while we were outside working. He didn't look surprised. He just said Elaine sometimes wandered at night because she had bad dreams and got confused, and that I shouldn't worry about it. When I asked if I should lock my door at night, he kind of laughed and said the guest room didn't have a lock because the house was old, so I let it go. But the second night was worse. I woke up again to the same footstep sounds, except this time they were faster. I could hear Elaine muttering to herself in the hallway. I couldn't make out most of it, but I heard my name once, which gave me goosebumps. Her shadow passed under my door 3 or 4 times. I was starting to hate that large gap under the door. The doorknob twisted, stopped, and the door opened about an inch. It stayed open a crack for just a moment, and I heard a whispering voice through the crack, but I couldn't make out what was said. Then the door shut again. After that, I had trouble sleeping, like I think anyone would in my shoes. In the morning, I told Richard exactly what happened. Once again, he explained it away. His explanation was she probably thought the room was empty and that she had been doing things like that more lately. He said it was embarrassing for her and asked me not to bring it up around Elaine. During the day, she seemed mostly normal, doing things like making lunch, folding towels, and watering plants, which made the whole thing harder to process. But every now and then, I would catch her staring at me from across the room with this flat, suspicious look. It was like she didn't recognize me, but also didn't like that I was there. On the 4th day, Richard and I were cleaning out a shed behind
She's
the
racist.
house. I noticed a dented metal walker shoved behind some boxes, and next to it was a broken picture frame with dried brown stains on the glass. This is kind of important for later. Later on that same day, when I went inside to use the bathroom, I noticed a long scratch on the hallway wall, about chest height, like something had been dragged across it. There were also small holes in one of the doors downstairs, like someone had hit it with something. These all seemed like signs of struggle. That night, I put my suitcase in front of my bedroom door. It wasn't heavy enough to stop anyone, but I figured it would at least make noise if the door opened. Around 2:30, I woke up to the sound of the suitcase scraping across the floor. I looked and saw my bedroom door was halfway open. Elaine was standing in the doorway in her nightgown.
Fuck no. And this is literally the plot of the movie.
I saw her mouth
Little
hung open
changes,
as she
but
was
pretty
heavily
much.
mouth breathing. I said her name, trying not to sound scared, even though the sight was horrifying. When she stepped into the room, that was when I saw she was holding a kitchen knife at her side. She walked closer to the bed and started whispering something, which I quickly was able to understand as, "You don't belong here." She said it like 5 times. "You don't belong here. You don't belong here." She came all the way to the side of the bed.
And you don't make noise to call the husband? Or you just stand there to be like... I mean, we're talking about an old lady. You can probably still, you're probably stronger than her. Just saying.
And stood over me with the knife hanging in her hand.
Something.
I yelled for Richard as loud as I could.
Oh, he did.
Elaine flinched like the sound scared her. Then she
It's like that shit happened in a movie.
turned and marched out of the room. Even the stiff way she marched out of the room was terrifying. She slammed the door and marched away. Richard came upstairs maybe 30 seconds later, acting annoyed, like I had woken him up for no reason. I told him she had been in my room with a knife. He kept saying she wouldn't hurt anyone and that she wasn't herself that night. This was officially when him downplaying her behavior began to piss me off. I said I wanted to go home, and he replied it was 3 in the morning and my mom was probably asleep. He said, "We'll talk about it in the morning." I I should have called my mom right there, but I didn't want to make the situation bigger. I pushed the dresser in front of the door after he left and stayed awake until sunrise. The next morning, Elaine acted like nothing happened. She made pancakes and was smiling again, giving normal grandmother vibes. Richard pulled me aside and apologized, but it didn't feel like a real apology. He said Elaine's memory had been getting worse, which...
Look, I'm sorry you had to go through this. It just happens. That's the apology. It's an apology because you said sorry in a phrase, but you're not apologizing for shit. Oh, sorry for that. Or sorry that this was a thing. No, I'm so sorry you went through that. I'm really, really sorry about it. Sorry that happened. You're not sorry.
sounded like an understatement. When I asked him if she had ever attacked anyone before, he took a pause. Then he said she had gotten upset with a caregiver once, but that it was handled. That was the first time I realized he had definitely been hiding things from me. I told him a second time that I wanted to leave. He said he understood, but my mom was at work until late, and he would drive me home the next morning after we finished one last job and they paid me. That afternoon, while Richard was outside on the phone, I went looking for my backpack because I wanted to pack early. For some reason, I found it in the laundry room. On my backpack, there was a blood stain clear as day, right on the outer pocket.
Yeah, there's no...
I called Richard into the room and showed him the blood. He grabbed the backpack, looking a little more angry than I'd seen yet, and he told me he accidentally cut himself earlier and moved my backpack in there while he cleaned up the blood. He finished it off with a "stop worrying." I told him I was calling my mom, and he once again tried to get me to calm down. I went upstairs, packed my bag, and tried calling anyway. The call failed twice, so I texted her to come get me, but it didn't send. Richard also refused to give me the Wi-Fi password. That was when I really started to feel trapped. I had to tank through until she came the next morning. The final night, I didn't even get in bed. I sat fully dressed on the top of the blanket with my shoes on and my bag next to me. I moved the dresser in front of the door again, but around
You're strong enough, right? Put the bed to, not just a
midnight,
dresser.
Richard came upstairs and told me to move it because it was dangerous in case of a fire. I refused at first, and for the first time, I heard him yell. He told me to move the dresser now. I complied and moved it just enough so the door could open. After he left, I waited in the dark with my phone in hand.
I'm sorry, this is random, but my cat just put something on the ground. What the fuck you doing, bitch? She's mine. Pick it up.
Around 2 in the morning, I heard Elaine downstairs.
Just yelling at me.
She was yelling this time. It sounded like she was yelling at Richard. Then I heard glass break. Richard said her name, trying to calm her down, and then there was a loud thud, followed by him shouting in pain. It sounded like she just attacked him. I got up and cracked my door open. The hallway was dark, but I could see light coming from the staircase from downstairs. Footsteps started coming up the stairs fast.
Oh.
I shut my door and pushed the dresser back as hard as I could. A few seconds later, Elaine hit the door from the other side. The doorknob rattled violently, and she started saying again and again that I didn't belong here. She sounded furious.
You don't belong here, you don't belong here, you don't belong!
Again and again, and I heard something metal strike the wood, and a piece of the door splintered inward. My sights landed on the window, my only exit, and I decided I was jumping out. I could hear Richard downstairs groaning and calling for her. Whatever she did to him, she was about to do to me, maybe worse. I got the window up and kicked out the screen. There was a small roof over the porch below the window, so I climbed out onto it with my backpack. Elaine was still banging on the door when I jumped out. I dropped from the porch roof into the bushes below. I ran down the gravel driveway without looking back. I could hear the front door open behind me, and Elaine was yelling from the porch. She was holding what I could only guess was a fireplace poker in one hand. I kept running until I reached the road, where I finally was able to call 911 with service. The police and an ambulance showed up maybe 15 minutes later. Richard had a cut on his head and a broken wrist from trying to stop her. Elaine was taken away by paramedics. The police got a hold of my mom, and she arrived as soon as she could. Richard later told my mom that Elaine had been getting worse for months, but he didn't want to put her in a facility because he felt guilty. He thought he could manage it himself. He also admitted she attacked 2 caregivers before me. If he wasn't an old man, my mom likely would have slapped him in the face after she heard all that. I still think about how many chances I
I
had
will
to
kick him
leave
in the
and how many
nuts.
times I ignored the obvious signs because I didn't want to seem dramatic. Honestly, I feel like we as humans try to hold out our hope that things are still normal for as long as possible, that we really don't see the actual danger we can be in until it's almost too late.
Look, I get it. I get it. This shit, it's your wife or it's your kid or some shit like that, but you do not have the capability to take care of them. I know it's probably really fucking expensive. I don't know because I never went through, so I don't want to be like, oh yeah, you should do that because I don't know how this shit works because I never went through. But you should probably like trying to get them the professional help they need. I'm not saying to lock them in a place or, but at least like try an institution that helps with that, that can handle that situations, and just leave them there, just visit and shit. Because at one point, and I'm obviously talking about someone suffering with from dementia, they could be super, they can hurt, they can hurt, they can be, like that. Richard, not only Richard, but the kid could have been killed because, oh no, she's my wife, I can take care of her. Bro, don't. I'm sorry, just don't. Just take care of her by allowing professional to take care of them. Got it? Don't try to be what you're not. You can't really help. You can't.